The stars burned cold above the dying world of Thyra Prime, and Queen Sithara stood alone in her war chamber as the final reports came through her communication screens. Her people were dying by the millions. The Valkyrie Dominion had once ruled 3 star systems with pride and strength, but now only their homeworld remained, and even that was slipping away like sand through desperate fingers. The enemy called themselves nothing, for they had no language and no culture and no mercy. But the galaxy knew them as the hollow parasitic hive mind species that consumed entire civilizations and left nothing behind but empty husks and silence. Sithra's compound eyes reflected the orange glow of burning cities on the horizon as she watched another defense tower fall to the swarm, and she felt the weight of her crown pressing down upon her head like a curse rather than an honor. She was young for a queen, barely past her second molt, and she had never expected to rule so soon. But her mother had died 3 cycles ago when the Hollow breached the northern continent, and now the fate of her entire species rested upon her shoulders. "My queen," her advisor Kethra spoke from behind her, his voice trembling with barely contained terror. "The outer colonies have gone silent, and our fleet reports that the Hollow mothership is entering orbit. We have perhaps 2 cycles before they begin their final assault." Sithara did not turn to face him because she could not bear to see the fear in his eyes when she had no comfort to offer. "Have any of our distress signals been answered?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "None. My queen, the Galactic Concord, has declared our system a quarantine zone, and no ships are permitted to enter or leave. They have written us off as already dead." The words cut deeper than any hollow claw could have, and Sithara gripped the edge of her command console until her chitin cracked under the pressure. The galaxy had abandoned them. She thought of her people, the workers who tended the crystal gardens, the warriors who trained from birth to defend their hives, the younglings who had never known a sky without hollow ships darkening the stars. And she wondered if this was how civilizations ended. Not with glory, but with silence and forgetting. "Leave me," she commanded Kethra, and he obeyed without question. Alone in the darkness, Sithara allowed herself to feel the despair she'd been hiding from her subjects. And for the first time since her coronation, she wept the clear fluid that Valkyrie shed in moments of absolute grief. But the universe, it seemed, was not quite finished with the Valkyrie. 300,000 kilometers from Thyra Prime, a small and battered ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with engines, smoking and hull plates barely holding together. The vessel was called the Perseverance, and it was an Earth frigate that had been decommissioned 15 years ago when humanity decided it was too old and too slow to serve in any official fleet. Commander Marcus Cole stood on the bridge of this dying ship with 37 crew members behind him, and he stared at the view screen with eyes that had seen too much war and too much loss. "Commander," his first officer Elena Vasquez spoke up, her voice careful and measured. "We picked up that distress signal by accident. We were just passing through this sector on our way to the frontier colonies, and this is not our fight." Marcus said nothing for a long moment as he watched the hollow swarm moving across the planet below like a living shadow. He was 53 years old, with gray streaking through his dark hair and scars crossing his face like a map of every battle he had survived. And he had stopped being a soldier of any government a decade ago, when his colony was raided and his daughter was taken, and no one came to help. Now he led a crew of mercenaries and outcasts, people who had nowhere else to go and nothing left to lose. And they survived by taking jobs that no respectable military would touch. "How many life signs on that planet?" he asked quietly. "Approximately 4 billion, sir, but the hollow infestation is spreading rapidly, and at this rate, there will be none left within a month. 4 billion souls waiting to die while the galaxy watched and did nothing." Marcus closed his eyes and saw his daughter's face, frozen forever at the age of 12, and he remembered how he had screamed for help that never came. "Sir," Elena pressed, We have 37 people on this ship, and our weapons are outdated, and our shields are operating at 60%. We cannot save an entire planet." "I know," Marcus replied. "Then what are you thinking?" He opened his eyes and looked at his crew, at the faces of men and women who had followed him through impossible odds before, and would follow him again if he asked. "I am thinking," he said slowly, "that someone has to try." Elena stared at him for a long moment, and then she shook her head with a smile that held no humor. "You are going to get us all killed, Marcus." "Probably," he admitted, "but I would rather die fighting for something than live knowing I ran away." He turned to face his crew and saw the same fire burning in their eyes that burned in his own heart. "I will not order any of you to stay," he announced. "This is not what we signed up for. And there is no payment at the end of this mission. Anyone who wants to leave can take the escape pods, and I will not judge you for it." No one moved. Old Sergeant Kowalski, who had fought in 3 different wars before joining Marcus, stepped forward with his rifle already in his hands. "You think we followed you this far just to run away now? Commander, we are with you until the end." The others nodded and voiced their agreement, and Marcus felt something warm spread through his chest that he had not felt in years. "Pride, then prepare for combat descent," he ordered. "We are going to war." The Perseverance angled toward Thyra Prime with her engines screaming in protest. And as they broke through the atmosphere, Marcus Cole had no idea that he was about to become a legend. Queen Sithara was still standing in her war chamber when the alarms began to sound, and for a terrible moment, she thought the Hollow had begun their final assault. But when she looked at her tactical display, she saw something that made no sense at all. A single ship was descending through the Hollow swarm, weapons firing in all directions, cutting a path of destruction through the enemy like a blade through flesh. "What is that?" she demanded of her officers. "What species would be insane enough to attack the Hollow with one ship?" The answer came a moment later, when a transmission crackled through her speakers, and a voice unlike any she had ever heard spoke words that would echo through Valkyrie history forever. "This is Commander Marcus Cole of the Earth vessel Perseverance. We received your distress signal, and we are here to help. Where do you need us?" Sithara stared at the screen in disbelief. Humans. She had heard of them. Of course, young species from a small blue world who had only recently discovered faster than light travel, but she had never imagined that they would answer a call that the entire galaxy had ignored. "Why?" she whispered to herself. "Why would they come?" She did not know the answer yet, but she would learn it in the months ahead, and it would change everything she thought she knew about courage and sacrifice and what it truly meant to be a hero. The Perseverance landed in the capital city, with smoke pouring from her wounds, and Commander Marcus Cole stepped onto Valkyrie soil for the first time. The war for Thyra Prime had begun. The first month of the siege was the hardest, because no one believed they could win. Queen Sithara stood in the ruins of what had once been a beautiful temple and watched the strange creatures, called humans, building fortifications out of rubble and scrap metal. And she could not understand what drove them to keep working when death was so certain. Commander Marcus Cole had taken charge of the defense with a quiet authority that even her proudest generals had learned to respect. And though his methods were strange and sometimes shocking, they worked. The Valkyrie were warriors of honor and tradition, who fought in formations that had been perfected over thousands of years. But Marcus taught them something new. He taught them to be unpredictable. "Your enemy knows exactly what you will do," he explained to Sithra's generals at their first war council. "Because you have been fighting the same way for centuries. The Hollow have studied you and learned your patterns, and that is why they are winning." General Kethvar, the oldest and most decorated of her commanders, bristled at the criticism. "You dare to insult our sacred battle traditions. Human, we were conquering star systems while your species was still living in caves." Marcus did not flinch from the larger alien's anger. And yet here you are, losing a war you should have won months ago. I am not insulting your traditions. General, I am trying to save your people." Sithara watched the exchange with growing fascination because she had never seen anyone stand up to Kethver before, and the human showed no fear despite being half the general's size. "What do you suggest?" she asked, breaking the tension before it could escalate. Marcus turned to her with respect in his eyes that she had not expected from a species so young. "We need to stop fighting like an army and start fighting like ghosts. Hit them where they do not expect. Retreat before they can respond. Make them afraid of every shadow and every corner. The Hollow are used to overwhelming their enemies with numbers, but they have never faced an enemy they could not predict." It was a radical idea, and many of her generals rejected it outright. But Sithara saw something in Marcus Cole that made her willing to take the risk. She saw hope. "We will try your way, Commander," she declared, and from that moment forward, everything changed. The humans integrated themselves into Valkyrie units and taught them tricks that seemed almost dishonorable at first, hiding and ambushing, setting traps, using the environment as a weapon, striking at supply lines instead of facing the enemy head-on. Marcus worked 20 hours a day without rest, moving from unit to unit, encouraging soldiers who had given up and planning operations that should have been impossible. Sithara found herself drawn to his presence in ways she did not fully understand. She was an insectoid queen with 4 arms and compound eyes and chitin armor that covered her body. And he was a soft-skinned mammal with strained round eyes and hair growing from his head. And yet, when they stood together looking at battle maps, she felt a connection that transcended their physical differences. "Why did you come?" she asked him one night as they shared a meal in her command center, eating the strange preserved foods from his ship, and she consuming the nutrient paste that sustained her species. Marcus was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Because someone had to," he said simply. "That is not an answer." He looked at her then, and she saw pain in his eyes that went deeper than any wound. "I had a daughter once. Her name was Sarah, and she had her mother's smile and my stubborn nature. When she was 12, raiders attacked our colony, and they took her, and I never saw her again." Sithara felt something twist in her chest that she later learned was compassion. "I am sorry. I called for help," Marcus continued, his voice growing rough. "I screamed for anyone to come and save us, but no one did. The colony was too small and too far from anything important. So the governments decided we were not worth saving." He met her eyes with an intensity that made her want to look away. "I could not save my daughter, Sithara, but I can save your people, and I will die before I let what happened to her happen to anyone else." From that night forward, Sithara understood what drove humans to do the impossible, and she began to believe that perhaps they could actually win this war. The months that followed were brutal beyond description. The Hollow attacked in waves that never seemed to end, and for every victory the defenders achieved, there were 3 more losses that threatened to break their spirit. Marcus lost his people one by one. Elena Vasquez died in the 4th month when she stayed behind to hold a bridge so that civilians could evacuate, and Marcus held her hand as she bled out and told her that he was proud of her. Sergeant Kowalski fell in the 6th month when a Hollow ambush caught his squad in the open, and the old warrior took 14 of the enemy with him before they finally brought him down. By the 9th month, Marcus had only 7 of his original crew left, and yet still he fought. Sithara watched him push himself beyond the limits of what any living creature should endure, and she marveled at the strange resilience that humans possessed. They were fragile beings with soft bodies and short lifespans, but they refused to break no matter how much pressure was applied. "You should rest," she told him one evening when she found him collapsed over a tactical display, his eyes red from exhaustion and his hands shaking from caffeine and stress. "I will rest when your people are safe," he replied. "You will die if you keep going like this." He laughed, and it was a broken sound that held no humor. "We are all going to die, Sithara. The question is not whether we die, but what we die for." She reached out with one of her forearms and touched his shoulder, and the contact sent a strange sensation through her body. "I do not want you to die, Marcus Cole." He looked up at her, and something passed between them that neither of them had words to describe. "I do not want to die either," he admitted. "But if my death can save billions of lives, then it will be worth it." The 10th month brought the turning point that no one had expected. The Hollow Queen herself, the massive hive mind creature that controlled all the parasites, entered orbit around Thyra Prime in her personal mothership, and the attacks intensified 100-fold. The defenders were pushed back to the capital city, and it seemed like the end had finally come. But Marcus Cole had one final plan. "There is a prototype weapon in the Perseverance cargo hold," he told Sithara during their last war council. "A singularity bomb that was supposed to be delivered to a research station, if we can get it inside the Hollow Mothership. The resulting implosion will destroy their queen and sever the hive mind connection." Hope flared in Sithra's chest. "Then we will send a strike team." "It will not work," Marcus said quietly. "The Hollow will jam any remote detonation signal, and their defenses will destroy any ship before it gets close. The only way to deliver the bomb is manually." The room fell silent as everyone understood what he was saying. "You mean someone has to pilot the ship into the mothership and trigger the bomb themselves?" Sithara said, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, that is a suicide mission." Marcus met her eyes, and she saw that he had already made his decision. "I know." "No," Sithara commanded, rising to her full height. "I forbid it. There must be another way." "There is not, and you know it." She wanted to argue, wanted to find some alternative that did not end with him dead. But deep in her heart, she knew he was right. The Hollow Queen had to die, and Marcus Cole was the only one with the skill and the will to make it happen. "Then I will go with you," she declared. "No, your people need you to lead them into the future. That is your purpose, Sithara, and my purpose is to make sure you have a future to lead them into." He stepped forward and took her primary hands in his, and the touch burned like fire. "I am not afraid," he said softly. "I stopped being afraid of death a long time ago. All I ask is that you remember us. Remember the humans who came to help when no one else would." Tears that Sithara had been holding back finally spilled down her face. "I will never forget you, Marcus Cole. None of my people will ever forget what you sacrificed for us." He smiled then, and it was the most beautiful and heartbreaking thing she had ever seen. "That is all I could ever ask for." The next morning, Marcus Cole boarded the Perseverance for the last time, and the war for Thyra Prime entered its final chapter. The sky above Thyra Prime burned red as the Perseverance lifted off for the last time, and Queen Sithara watched from her command center with her hearts breaking into pieces. Marcus Cole sat alone in the pilot's seat of the old frigate, his hands steady on the controls, despite the death that waited for him in the void above. The last 3 members of his crew had wanted to come with him, but he had ordered them to stay behind because the Volcari would need humans to help them rebuild. And someone had to carry the memory of what happened here back to Earth. The singularity bomb rested in the cargo hold behind him, a device of terrible power that would create a temporary black hole when, activated, nothing within 10,000 kilometers would survive the implosion. "Commander Cole," Sithra's voice came through his communication system, and he could hear the tears she was trying to hide. "The Hollow Fleet is moving to intercept you. You will never make it through their defenses." "Then I will just have to be creative," he replied with a calm he did not feel. The Hollow ships swarmed toward him like angry insects, thousands of them blocking the path between his little frigate and the massive mothership that hung in orbit like a tumor on the stars. Marcus pushed the Perseverance to speeds she was never designed to handle, and the old ship groaned in protest but did not fail him. He had learned during the siege that the Hollow were predictable in their own way. They attacked in patterns, moving together like a single organism. And that coordination was their greatest strength, but also their greatest weakness. If he could create enough chaos, he could slip through the gaps in their formation. He fired every weapon the Perseverance possessed, not aiming at individual ships but at the spaces between them, and the explosions created clouds of debris that confused the Hollow sensors. 3 ships crashed into each other, trying to track him through the chaos, and Marcus used the opening to push deeper into enemy territory. Sithara watched the battle unfold on her tactical display, and she felt every near miss and every close call as if she were on that ship with him. "He is insane," General Kethver whispered beside her, and for the first time, there was admiration rather than contempt in his voice. "No," Sithara replied. "He is human." The Hollow adapted quickly, as they always did, and soon Marcus was surrounded by a wall of enemy ships with no escape possible. But he did not need to escape, he only needed to reach the mothership. "Sithara." His voice came through the speakers, surprisingly calm considering the death closing in around him. "I want you to know something. Marcus, do not. Meeting you was the best thing that happened to me since I lost my daughter. You gave me a reason to fight again. A reason to believe that the universe was not completely dark. Whatever happens next, I need you to know that." Sithara could not speak because her throat had closed with emotion. "Goodbye. Sithara, take care of your people and maybe someday tell them that a human loved them enough to die for them." He kept the communication before she could respond, and she screamed his name into the silence that followed. Marcus Cole aimed the Perseverance at the heart of the Hollow mothership and pushed the engines past their breaking point. The frigate burst through the outer hull of the enemy vessel like a bullet through flesh, tearing through corridors and chambers filled with Hollow warriors who could not react fast enough to stop him. Deep inside the mothership, he finally saw her at the Hollow Queen herself, a massive creature that filled an entire chamber. Her body connected to thousands of neural tendrils that linked her to every parasite in the system. She turned her attention to him, and he felt her mind pressing against his own, trying to understand this strange creature that had dared to challenge her. But humans were resistant to psychic intrusion in ways that most species were not, and Marcus pushed back against her mental assault with all the anger and grief and determination that had brought him this far. "You took everything from a people who never harmed you," he said aloud, though he knew she could not understand his words. "And now I am going to take everything from you." He activated the singularity bomb. The explosion that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A sphere of absolute darkness expanded from the heart of the mothership, swallowing everything in its path. The Hollow Queen screamed across 1,000 psychic frequencies as her body was torn apart atom by atom. And that scream rippled through every parasite connected to her mind. On Thyra Prime, the Hollow soldiers suddenly stopped moving, their bodies collapsing as the hive mind that controlled them shattered into nothingness. Across the system, Hollow ships lost power and drifted dead in the void, their crews dying in waves as the connection to their queen was severed forever. The war was over, but the Perseverance was gone, consumed by the singularity along with Marcus Cole and the Hollow mothership. Sithara stood frozen at her command console, staring at the empty space where the battle had taken place, and she felt something inside her die along with the human who had saved her people. Around her, Valkyrie soldiers began to cheer as they realized what had happened, but she could not join their celebration. "Sound the all clear," she commanded in a voice that felt like it belonged to someone else, "and prepare a memorial ceremony for our fallen allies." The days that followed were a blur of activity and grief. The Valkyrie worked to secure their world and begin the long process of rebuilding, and Sithara forced herself to lead them, even though every moment felt hollow without Marcus Cole standing beside her. She ordered search parties to scan the area where the singularity had formed, hoping against hope that some trace of him might have survived. But they found nothing, not even debris from the Perseverance. The singularity would have consumed everything. Her science advisors told her. Nothing could have survived that level of gravitational force. "I'm sorry, my queen." But Sithara refused to accept their certainty. She authorized a full cycle of mourning for the humans who had died defending Thyra Prime, and the entire planet stopped to honor the strange aliens who had given everything for people they had never met. In the capital city, Sithara commissioned a monument unlike any that had existed before, a massive sculpture of a human hand reaching toward the stars, carved from the chitin of fallen hollow warriors. Beneath it, she placed a plaque with words that would be remembered for generations. They came from the stars when no one else would answer. They fought and bled and died for us, and we will never forget their sacrifice. The three surviving humans, Lieutenant Sarah Chun, Corporal Michael Okonkwo, and Private James Rodriguez, attended the ceremony, and they wept openly as they watched the monument unveiled. Sithara spoke to them afterward in a private audience. "Your commander was the greatest warrior I have ever known," she told them, "and I swear to you that the Valkyrie will honor humanity for as long as our species exists." Lieutenant Chen wiped her eyes and managed a small smile. He would have hated all this attention. Marcus was never comfortable with praise, but I think he would be happy knowing that we won. "We did not win," Sithara replied. "He won, we simply survived because of his courage." The years passed, and the Valkyrie rebuilt their civilization stronger than before. Sithara grew from a young queen into a wise empress, leading her people into an era of prosperity that they had never imagined possible. The Valkyrie joined the Galactic Concord as a major power, and they used their influence to strengthen ties between their species and humanity, ensuring that the alliance forged in blood would never be broken. But Sithara never stopped searching for Marcus Cole. She sent probes into the region where the singularity had formed, hoping to find some evidence that he had survived against all odds. She consulted with the greatest physicists in the galaxy, asking them about the theoretical possibility of surviving a singularity event. Everyone told her the same thing, that no living creature could have survived what happened that day, but she refused to give up hope. Deep in her heart, she felt something that she could not explain, a certainty that defied logic and science. Marcus Cole was still alive somewhere, waiting to be found, and she would never stop looking for him. 53 years had passed since the Battle of Thyra Prime, and Empress Sithara sat upon her throne in a palace that had been rebuilt from the ashes of war. Her chitin had darkened with age, and her movements were slower than they once were, but her mind remained sharp, and her spirit remained strong. She had led her people through 5 decades of peace and prosperity, and the Valkyrie Dominion had grown into one of the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. But despite all her achievements, there was an emptiness inside her that nothing could fill. She still dreamed of Marcus Cole almost every night, and she still sent expeditions to search for any trace of him in the void where he had vanished. Her advisors had long ago stopped trying to convince her that she was wasting resources on a hopeless quest because they knew that nothing could shake her belief that he was still alive. "My Empress," her chief science officer Velthok entered the throne room with an expression that Sithara had never seen on his face before. "We have received a most unusual report from Survey Team 17. What have they found?" she asked, expecting another false lead like so many that had come before. They were mapping a barren moon at the edge of explored space, a place called Kether's Rest, and they detected something impossible. Sithara leaned forward, her heart's beginning to beat faster. "Speak plainly, Velthek." They found a small settlement, an artificial biodome with a garden growing inside and a single life sign. Her breath caught in her throat. "What species?" "Human, my Empress. The life sign is human." The world seemed to stop spinning as Sithara processed what she had just heard. A human on a barren moon at the edge of space, alone, after 53 years. "Prepare my personal transport," she commanded, rising from her throne with an energy she had not felt in decades. "I am going to Kether's Rest immediately." "My Empress, that is highly inadvisable. We do not know if this is a trap or a mistake or something. Else entirely, please allow us to investigate first." "No, I have waited 53 years for this moment, and I will not wait a single day longer. Prepare the transport now." Her advisors and guards tried to argue, but Sithara would not be moved, and within hours, she was aboard her fastest ship heading toward the coordinates that Survey Team 17 had provided. The journey took 3 days, and they were the longest days of her life. She barely slept, barely ate, and spent most of her time staring out the viewport at the stars that seemed to move far too slowly. When they finally arrived at Kether's Rest, Sithara saw exactly what the survey team had described: a small moon with no atmosphere and no life, except for a single dome of clear material that contained a patch of green, unlike anything else in this dead system. "Take us down," she ordered, and her pilot obeyed without question. The shuttle landed beside the dome, and Sithara stepped out into the airless environment wearing a protective suit that felt strange after so many years of sitting on a throne. Through the transparent walls of the dome, she could see a small dwelling made from salvaged ship parts, a garden filled with vegetables and flowers, and a figure moving slowly among the plants. Her heart nearly stopped when she recognized the way he moved. It was him. Older now, with white hair and a body that had been worn down by time and hardship, but unmistakably him. Marcus Cole was alive. She entered through an airlock that he had clearly built himself, and the moment she stepped inside the dome, the air hit her face with the scent of growing things and recycled atmosphere. He did not look up at first. He was focused on a row of tomatoes that needed tending, and she stood frozen in place, unable to find words for what she was feeling. Finally, he straightened his back with the careful movements of someone whose body had begun to fail him, and he turned to face her. His eyes widened for just a moment, and then his face relaxed into a smile that she had seen in her dreams for 53 years. "Took you long enough," he said. Sithara felt tears streaming down her face as she walked toward him on legs that shook with emotion. "Marcus, how is this possible? We searched for you. We never stopped searching." He set down his gardening tools and met her halfway, and when they stood face to face, she could see the years written on his skin in lines and scars and weathered flesh. "The singularity did not kill me," he explained, his voice rough from years of disuse. "It displaced me, threw me across space and time like a leaf in a storm. I woke up on this moon with nothing but the clothes on my back and a broken escape pod that must have ejected automatically. But why did you not contact us? Why did you not send a signal?" He gestured toward a pile of rusted equipment in the corner of the dome. "I had tried for years. I tried everything I could think of, but my transmitter was damaged beyond repair. And this moon is so far from any travel routes that no one ever came close enough to receive my signal." Sithara reached out and touched his face with trembling hands, needing to confirm that he was real and not another dream. "So you just survived alone for 53 years? What else could I do? I built a shelter from the escape pod wreckage. I created a garden using seeds from the emergency supplies, and I waited." His eyes softened as he looked at her. "I never stopped believing that you would find me, Sithara, even when decades passed and no one came. I held on to the hope that you were still looking." "I never stopped," she whispered. "I sent expedition after expedition. Year after year, my advisors thought I was crazy, but I knew in my heart that you were still alive." They stood in silence for a long moment. Two old souls reunited after a lifetime apart. "You have changed," Marcus observed, studying her aged features. "You look like an empress now, powerful and wise." "You have changed too," she replied. "You look like someone who has earned every rest the universe could offer." He laughed, and it was the same laugh she remembered from the war. Warm and honest and full of life despite everything. I had a lot of time to think out here about the war, about you, about what really matters in life, and I realized that everything I did was worth it. How can you say that you lost everything, your ship, your crew, 53 years of your life? But your people survived, he said simply. 4 billion souls who would have been consumed by the Hollow are alive today because of what we did. How could I ever regret that? Sithara shook her head in wonder. You humans are the most impossible creatures in the entire galaxy. You suffer and sacrifice and somehow find meaning in the pain. Maybe that is our gift, Marcus replied. We are fragile and short-lived, so we have to make every moment count. We cannot afford to waste time on regret or despair. She took his hands in hers, marveling at how small and delicate they felt compared to her own. Come home with me, Marcus. Come to Thyra Prime, and let me give you the life you deserve. You will be honored as the greatest hero in our history, and you will want for nothing for the rest of your days. He was quiet for a long moment, looking around at the small dome that had been his world for so long. I am an old man now, Sithara. I am not sure what use I would be to anyone. You saved an entire civilization. You have already given more than anyone could ever ask. Let us take care of you now. Marcus Cole looked at the Empress of the Velkhari, the young queen he had fought beside so many years ago, and he saw something in her eyes that made his decision easy. He saw love. Not romantic love, perhaps, but something deeper. The love that exists between souls who have shared impossible trials and come out the other side together. All right, he said finally. Take me home. And for the first time in 53 years, Marcus Cole left the moon that had been his prison and his sanctuary, ready to face whatever came next. The return of Marcus Cole to Thyra Prime was an event that shook the galaxy to its core. When Empress Sithra's transport entered orbit around the Velkhari homeworld with the legendary human aboard, the news spread faster than light itself, carried by communication networks and rumor chains until every civilized world knew what had happened. The man who had sacrificed everything to save the Velkhari was alive. Marcus stood at the viewport of the Imperial transport and watched as the planet grew larger before him, and he barely recognized the world he had fought so hard to save. The cities that had been ruins were now gleaming towers of crystal and light. The skies that had been choked with smoke were now clear and blue, and the population that had been fighting for survival was now thriving in peace. You did this, Sithara said, standing beside him. All of this exists because of you. No, Marcus replied softly. I just gave your people a chance. They did the rest themselves. The shuttle landed in the capital city, and Marcus could see crowds gathering in the streets below. Millions of Velkhari who had come to witness the return of their greatest hero. Are you ready for this? Sithara asked. Marcus looked down at his worn clothes and his weathered body and laughed. I spent 53 years alone on a barren moon. I think I can handle a few crowds. But nothing could have truly prepared him for what happened when he stepped off the shuttle. The noise hit him first, a roar of voices and cheers and songs that seemed to shake the very air. And then he saw them, the endless sea of Velkhari faces looking up at him with something that approached worship. Children, who had been born long after the war, held signs with his name written in both Velkhari script and human letters, and elders who remembered the siege wept openly at the sight of him. Mixed among the Velkhari were humans, thousands of them, descendants of the 3 crew members who had stayed behind and new arrivals, who had come to join the alliance between their species. Humanity and the Velkhari had grown close in the years since the war, bound together by the sacrifice that Marcus and his crew had made. This is too much, Marcus whispered to Sithara, overwhelmed by the display. You gave them everything, she replied. They want to show you that it mattered. Please let them. So Marcus walked through the crowd, shaking hands and touching faces, and accepting the gratitude of an entire civilization. And though it exhausted him, he could not deny the warmth that spread through his heart. He was led to the monument that Sithara had built in his honor, the massive hand reaching toward the stars, and for the first time, he saw his own legacy carved in stone. Beside the original monument, workers had already begun constructing a new statue, this one showing Marcus as he was now, older and wiser, with a gentle smile on his face. "We will add the inscription once you have had time to rest," Sithara told him, "and you can choose the words yourself if you wish." Marcus stared at the monument for a long time, remembering the friends he had lost and the battles he had fought and the years he had spent waiting on that lonely moon. "I do not need a statue," he said finally. "What I need is something to do." Sithara tilted her head in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I have spent 5 decades with nothing but time and my own thoughts. I am too old to fight. But I am not too old to teach. Let me do something useful with whatever years I have left." And so it was that Marcus Cole, the legendary hero of Thyra Prime, became a professor at the Imperial Academy. He did not teach tactics or military history, though many expected him to instead. He taught philosophy. He gathered young Velkari and humans in his classroom and spoke to them about things that no textbook could contain, about compassion and sacrifice, about the value of a single life, about what it meant to fight for something greater than yourself. "War is not about killing enemies," he told them. "War is about protecting the people you love. The moment you forget that, you become the very thing you are fighting against." His students adored him because he treated them as equals and listened to their questions with genuine interest, and shared stories from his life that made the past feel alive. Empress Sithara visited him often, sometimes for official matters, but more often just to sit in his garden and talk. He had been given a small home near the monument, with a plot of land where he could grow vegetables and flowers, just as he had on his lonely moon. And he found that he was happy in a way he had not been since before he lost his daughter. "I never thought I would feel at peace again," he admitted to Sithara one evening as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. "After Sarah died, I thought that part of me was gone forever. But being here, with your people, teaching the next generation, it has healed something that I thought could never be healed." Sithara reached out and took his hand, and neither of them spoke for a long while. "You know that my kind can sense emotions," she said finally. "And I have felt your heart since the day we met, even across 53 years and the vastness of space. I could feel you out there, waiting." "Is that how you found me?" he asked. "Partly, but mostly it was stubbornness and hope, and the absolute refusal to accept that you were gone sound familiar?" Marcus laughed. "I suppose we are more alike than either of us realized." The years that followed were the happiest of Marcus Cole's long and difficult life. He watched his students grow and graduate and go on to make their own marks on the galaxy. And he knew that the lessons he taught would live on long after he was gone. He saw the alliance between humanity and the Velkari grow stronger with each passing year. And he knew that the sacrifice he had made during the war had created something beautiful and lasting. He spent his days in the garden and his evenings with Sithara, and for the first time in decades, he felt like he belonged somewhere. 3 years after his return to Thyra Prime, Marcus Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by friends and loved ones who had gathered to say goodbye. Sithara was beside him at the end, holding his hand as his breathing slowed and finally stopped, and she wept for the second time in her life over this strange and wonderful human who had changed everything. The funeral was the largest in Velkari history. Billions watched as Marcus Cole was laid to rest beside the monument he had never wanted, and leaders from every civilized world came to pay their respects. A new statue was unveiled, not a warrior with weapons drawn, but an old man sitting peacefully, surrounded by children of every species, with a gentle smile on his face. The inscription at the base read words that would be remembered for as long as the galaxy endured. He gave everything, he asked for nothing. He taught us what it means to be worthy of the sacrifice. Empress Cythera spoke at the ceremony, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. When Marcus Cole first arrived at Thyra Prime, we were a dying people with no hope left. He brought us not just victory, but meaning. He showed us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it, and he proved that a single life, lived with purpose and compassion, can change the fate of worlds. She paused, looking up at the statue of the man who had been her friend and teacher, and the greatest hero she had ever known. The humans have a saying. They call it humanity, not because it belongs only to them, but because it represents the best of what any species can be. And Marcus Cole embodied that ideal more fully than anyone I have ever met. The crowd was silent, hanging on her every word. Let us honor his memory not just with statues and ceremonies, but with action. Let us be kind when kindness is hard, brave when courage seems impossible, and compassionate when the easy choice would be to turn away. That is the legacy of Marcus Cole. And that is how we will ensure that his sacrifice was not in vain. As the ceremony ended and the crowds began to disperse, Cythera remained alone beside the statue of her friend. The twin moons of Thyra Prime rose above the horizon, casting silver light across the capital city that Marcus had helped to save. And somewhere in the distance, she could hear children laughing. "Goodbye, old friend," she whispered to the statue. "You taught me what it means to be human, and that is a gift I will carry with me until my last breath." And across the galaxy, in academies and warships and